called birthright citizenship. While the legal fight over the plan continues, the U.S. Supreme Court will consider whether lower court judges had the authority to put that executive order on hold across the entire country. So let's talk about this with CNN's chief legal affairs correspondent Paula Reid and CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. And Paul, the Supreme Court did not agree to Trump's request that would have allowed him to start enforcing his birthright citizenship plan right now. But it does seem significant that they're hearing this argument on whether or not the lower court even has the authority to pause his executive order.
This is huge because we've seen this tension between the White House and the judiciary building, and nothing vexes President Trump more than the fact that lower court judges a single judge can block his policy for the entire country. Now, he's not the only one this happens to. All modern presidents have faced this. It frustrates all of them. But look, no one has had more policies blocked than Trump because he's issued a record number of executive orders and he plays at the edges of constitutional power. Now, the argument in favor of allowing judges to do this is that you have one policy governing the entire country, and the policies can be paused while they are vetted for whether they're constitutionally valid. And I think it's so interesting that what brings this issue to the Supreme Court is birthright citizenship, because for all the bravado the Trump legal team has about how their policies are going to be upheld by the Supreme Court, this is the one where they sort of tell me, we're not sure we're going to win. So it's interesting. It's become like a Trojan horse to get this bigger issue of the power of judges before the high court.
Yeah, and as you note, this is an issue that has that Biden had to grapple with, that Obama had to grapple with, but like you say, Trump's had to grapple with it more than others, the power of one judge to block something all over the country. Ellie, what would happen if the U.S. Supreme Court actually said district court judges don't have the ability to make this type of sweeping decision, blocking an individual law all over the country, not just there in their district?
Well, Jake, I think it's quite possible that the Supreme Court could say just that. As you've said, this is an issue that's come up over the last several presidencies, and I think there's a perfectly valid legal question there about how can a single district court judge, unelected, dictate policy for the entire country. If that were to play out here, though, we might see the downside of that, which is a lack of uniformity. Let's take birthright citizenship. How can it be the case, hypothetically, that a person born in the Western District of Pennsylvania perhaps is not a citizen, but a person born under the same circumstances in the District of New Jersey would be a citizen? And I think the ultimate solution there has to fall to Congress, where they'd have to look at laws that would expedite these types of cases, get them up to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. And it's worth noting the House actually just passed a resolution along these lines just a couple weeks ago. It was a straight party line. Republicans were for it, Democrats were against it. But as a rule, whichever party is in the White House hates these injunctions, whichever party is on the other side tends to favor them.
And Paul, there's also a legal update on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Salvadoran man accused of being an MS-13, deported to El Salvador, despite a judge's order saying he should not be deported to El Salvador. What's the update?
So the judge has ordered a discovery, so the gathering of evidence that you would usually do in a big case over what the government has actually done to facilitate this man's return. Not surprisingly, the administration is fighting that. And today, in the most eloquent way possible, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected this attempt. This is I'm not saying I agree with everything they say, but this is one of the best written things I have read in a while. They talk about how the government is asserting the right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. This should be shocking, they said, not only to judges, but to the intuitive senses of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. I won't read all my favorite quotes, but they say, yet we cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch, the White House, perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. So they're rejecting the administration's fight against this discovery process. I would just note that some of these complaints should probably be directed to their brethren at the Supreme Court that offered an ambiguous order that allowed all this confusion.
But they said they're good brethren?
I couldn't make it up.
Good brethren?
Good brethren.
Did Alexander Hamilton write that order?
Reagan appointee.